And farmers,
family farms.
yeah, exactly, and it's farmers in the United States face the same problems.
Right.
I mean, if you're a small farmer, you borrow money just to keep yourself alive and to keep yourself going, and then what happens? There'll be a medical expense, or someone will get married, or there'll be something. The crops will fail, and all of a sudden you face losing not only your land but your identity, and the identity that's been in your family for generations. So rather than face that oblivion, some farmers have chosen to take their own lives.
Right.
Now, what the Green Revolution, the Green Revolution has contributed to this in various ways by degrading soil quality and hooking farmers into this sort of need to take loans to buy fertilizer and buy seed. The next green revolution, we're being told, is going to involve farmers planting genetically modified seeds.
Oh boy!
Now, we should worry, because the majority of genetically modified crops are really owned by two companies, both of them pesticide companies. These aren't.
And one of them is Monsanto.
One of them is Monsanto.
Is it
and Syngenta. Syngenta is the other big firm.
Oh, okay.
And so it's important to remember that with these genetically modified crops, there isn't an increase in yield. You're not actually getting more out of the ground per se, but you're getting better pest control, or at least they claim that. And in the first couple of years, maybe that's true. But over the long term, they've study after study is now showing, now that we've had a long time to assess it, that yields don't go up with genetically modified crops. The only thing that they allow farmers to do is spray the field, and then forget it once in a while, and that way farmers can earn an off-farm income.
Right.
So the primary advantage to genetically modified crops is not that they make more food or make food healthier; it's that they allow farmers to get a second job.
Right. Talk a little bit about the experiments with GM and in places like Brazil, and how soy, the introduction of soy as the new miracle product.
Well, I mean, what's interesting about soy, soy is a wonderful crop. It's very nutritious. It's great for the soil. If you grow it in certain kinds of crop systems, it's a miracle. It's a really great plant. Unfortunately, what we've done is apply these sort of technologies of Fordism, of mass production, of industrial production to our food systems. And so in the US, but also in Brazil, Brazil's the largest exporter of soybeans, you're seeing amazing amounts of environmental degradation that come as a result of this capital-intensive, genetically modified soy plantations. Also
slavery, as you noted
that's
in
right,
the book.
yeah. I mean, it's not just environmental costs. There are big environmental costs where, for example, one of the big agents of the destruction of the Amazon rainforest now is genetically modified soy plantations. Farmers going in, clear-cutting the land and growing soy.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. In Brazil, according to the International Labour Organization, up to 40,000 slaves are working in agriculture in Brazil today. Some of them in soy plantations, a lot of them, of course, in biofuels and sugarcane as well.
And talk a little bit about the difference between chattel slavery, for example, when slaves were property and it behooved the master to take good care of their property, just as they, men take good care of their cars because they own them.
Right.
But in the modern slavery, they just use them up and throw them away.
Exactly.
They work them to death.
There's no incentive, to even engage in the most, basic sort of moral economy. The idea in modern slavery is that there will be some process of indenture, so either money will be lent to a prospective worker, or they will be told that we've got a great job for you and the wages are fantastic. Come on in, help yourself to anything in the company store, and we'll settle it up later on. And it turns out that the bill for whatever it is that you got in the company store means you have to work for 2 years.
It's the same old.
But as you say, it's
over.
worse than chattel slavery, because there is no incentive for the slave owners to engage in any kind of support for social
make sure
reproduction.
that the slaves eat.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a community that broke away from the the main system. I think it was in Brazil, and they were the labor group MST. Could you talk about them?
Yeah, I mean the MST.
That was exciting to me.
They're amazing. I mean, they're a group of now over 1 million landless people.
But let's talk about their title. I can't recall.
So
it.
the MST is the Movimento dos Trabalhadores Sem Terra, which is the movement of Trabalhadores Rurais Sem Terra, which means the movement of rural landless workers.
Right.
And I mean, they don't all come from rural areas. A lot of them are, grew up or moved to the shanty towns and the informal settlements in Sao Paulo and Brazil, and a lot of the big, in Rio, in a lot of the big Brazilian cities. But they have a vision that actually what they want is to be able to have their own land and to be able to grow their own food and to be able to participate in the economy through taking over, through having land. Now, the government has a very bad land reform program where they send people off to land that it's utterly unsuited to crop production. They leave them there with basically nothing. The MST has a very different approach. First of all, they build political communities of 100 or so families who get together and learn how to live together while they plot how they're going to get land. And then one day, they'll occupy land.
Right.
Land that isn't necessarily being used for anything, land that is underproductive or just being used for speculation. And in fact, under the law, they're allowed to occupy land that is out of production.
Right.
So they'll go in, they'll take over this land, and they'll build amazing communities. They'll build schools. They'll get the government to provide money for hospitals. They'll build these communities that, in every way, in every major indicator, are doing much better. They're healthier. The people live longer. People are happier. People are richer than the government land settling programs. And that's because people have seized back their own lives. It was a spirit of yes, we can, and then they did, and they didn't.
One
wait
of
for
the things that I liked about it was a true experiment in democracy and true democracy, and as you pointed out in the book, not this every 4 years nonsense, but real democracy. And you talked about how they seem to have learned from some of the experiments in China and elsewhere, where people, they didn't force cooperative farming on the people. They decided that if you want to work your individual farm or if you want to work a cooperative. Talk a little bit about some of that experimentation.
Real democracy is really the right to make your own mistakes. And rather than having those mistakes made for you by someone else.
Yes.
And what the MST did was actually they made mistakes. They initially started by saying, actually, now everyone will be a cooperative and you will farm in this way. And people were not down with having things dictated from on high, particularly when they'd gone to all the trouble of organizing and mobilizing themselves to then be sort of given the line from headquarters. Seemed anathema, and people rebelled against that. And so now, while a lot of the MST settlements are shifting towards cooperatives and they're shifting towards organic and agroecological kinds of agriculture, that's not being rammed down their throats necessarily. It's being offered as an alternative. There's a university where training in these kinds of new agriculture are happening.